Welcome back to Amplify Women's Health. It is Tech Tuesday, and today we are looking at the Mira device, which is a hormone analyzer that can measure up to 4 of your reproductive hormones at home. Today we're going to be breaking down the full Mira ecosystem, what it tracks, how it works, what the science says about it, and most importantly, who it's actually built for. Most of these reviews from this tool come from a trying to conceive lens, and that's valid, but it's not the only perspective. So I'm giving you a perspective from the ecosystem lens as a researcher and a consumer to give you a broader evidence-informed picture of what Mira actually is and who it serves. So let's get into it. Before we talk about Mira specifically, let's set the stage. We are living through a genuine revolution in women's health technology. And one of the biggest shifts is that women can now track hormones that used to require a clinical lab. Not too long ago, if you had wanted to know your luteinizing hormones, follicular stimulating hormone, progesterone, you needed a doctor's order, a blood draw, and days of waiting. Mira changed that. It's a quantitative at-home hormone monitor, and I want to be precise about the word quantitative. This is not a yes or no ovulation test. This is actual numbers, actual hormone concentrations in your urine, measured and graphed over time. So the device is called the Mira Hormone Analyzer, and it's about the size of a small TV remote. You pair it with their urine test wands, which take about 16 to 21 minutes to process, and then the results sync directly to the Mira app on your phone via Bluetooth. That's the core technology. Now let's talk about the full ecosystem, because Mira is not just one product. So what I have in my hands are the Max wands. But when we're talking about Mira, you might just think about one product, but you have to understand that there's a full ecosystem, and understanding the lineup can help you figure out which tool is right for you. So the kit that we used in our research at Shia's Labs is the Max kit, and that's what I can speak to directly, but I want to walk you through some of the other options that exist. Different people are going to fit different needs. So the Max kit can review 3 hormones: luteinizing hormone, estrogen, and progesterone. Luteinizing hormone and estrogen predict ovulation, and progesterone confirms that it actually happened. That distinction matters. A lot of tools can tell you that ovulation is coming. Mira tells you that it occurred. The Ultra 4 is Mira's newest kit, and it's very exciting development in their lineup right now. It tracks all 4 hormones, adding follicular stimulating hormone, and it introduces what Mira calls 4D ovulation profiling. This is a feature that no other at-home tracker currently offers. I haven't personally used Ultra 4, so I can't speak to it. I'm not going to overstate what I can verify, but the concept is significant. Follicular stimulating hormone tracking alongside 3 hormones gives you a much more complete picture of your cycle, especially for women in their 30s and 40s. They also offer other kits, options designed specifically for perimenopause, which I'll mention briefly when we get to the science section. Now I want to address the price directly because it's real and it matters. The Max Starter Kit, which includes your analyzer and 10 wands, runs $169. If you want 20 wands included, that's $199 to $229 depending on the bundle. The Ultra 4 kit starts at $249 for 20 wands or $269 for 30 wands, which Mira recommends if you have a longer or irregular cycle. After you purchase the first kit, you don't need to rebuy the analyzer, but you will have to restock your wands every cycle. And the Max wands run for about $71 for 20, and the Ultra 4 wands are priced separately. And the recommended uses is 18 to 22 wands for regular cycle, up to 30 for irregular ones. So yes, the ongoing cost is real. If you're approaching perimenopause and want a more comprehensive picture, their Menopause Transitions Kit is $259 and is specifically designed for that stage. The cost is a genuine barrier for a lot of women, so I'm not going to gloss over that, but that's also why this device is a specific person that it's built for, and we'll talk about exactly who that is in a few moments. The trade-off is real. The trade-off is real data about your hormones that previously required clinic visits to access. Whether that trade-off makes sense depends entirely on where you are in your health journey. The good news is that Mira is FSA and HSA eligible. So if you have one of those insurance accounts, you can use pre-tax dollars. That changes the math meaningfully for a lot of people. So that's the lineup. Now let's get into what is actually under the hood. We're talking about the science of Mira. So let's get into how it actually works. Mira uses fluorescent immunoassay technology, which is the same core methodology used in many clinical lab tests. The wand contains antibodies that bind to the target hormone in your urine. Mira measures luteinizing hormone, follicular stimulating hormone, E3G, and PDG. E3G and PDG are the urine metabolites for estrogen and progesterone. The analyzer then uses fluorescent light to measure how much of the hormone is present. The rest is a quantitative number, not a line, not a symbol, an actual concentration value. In a 2025 lab study conducted by Mira Labs, Mira's results were compared against certified commercial reference standards, essentially the gold standard lab values. Across all 4 hormones, luteinizing hormone, follicular stimulating hormone, estrogen, and progesterone, Mira's readings were consistently closest to those lab values compared to 3 other quantitative at-home hormone trackers. A 2024 clinical study published in the journal Medicina confirmed that Mira's readings for LH, estrogen, and PDG closely align with serum, meaning blood, hormone levels successfully detected ovulation. Now I want to be real with you here because this is where the nuance lives. In that same 2024 study also found that Mira's urinary measurements showed more fluctuation than blood serum measurements. Urine concentration can vary based on hydration, that's just biology, so urinary hormone tracking is genuinely useful, but it is not identical to a blood draw. If you're in a clinical fertility treatment context, your doctor's blood work is still the reference. It's worth noting here that Mira actually recognizes this limitation themselves, and they now offer at-home blood test kit for fertility and perimenopause that test 8 hormones. So if you want the depth of blood work without a clinic visit, that option does exist within the Mira ecosystem. Here's an important note for anyone who has PCOS. PCOS can specifically cause chronically elevated baseline luteinizing hormone levels, which means that a standard luteinizing hormone surge threshold may not apply to your cycle the same way. Mira's AI does adapt to your personal patterns over time, which helps, but it's worth discussing with your provider if PCOS is a part of your picture. What I find genuinely impressive about Mira is not just the accuracy data, it's the longitudinal view. The hormonal fingerprint builds over cycles. Most clinical testing gives you a snapshot, Mira gives you a film. And understanding women's health, that longitudinal picture is incredibly valuable. So let's talk about who it's for, because once again, we got into the nuances and the trade-offs that come with using a device like Mira. And depending on who's asking, the precision that comes with it makes a big difference. So you are a strong fit for the Mira device if you are actively trying to conceive, TTC, and want quantitative data, not a blinking smiley face. Somebody with irregular cycles, PCOS, or history of fertility challenges who wants to understand their hormonal patterns more deeply. A woman in her 30s who wants to start understanding where she is hormonally, not waiting for symptoms to show up. Someone whose doctor has suggested hormone monitoring, but you want ongoing data between appointments, not just a single blood draw. Mira is probably not the first tool you'll pick if you're someone with a regular, predictable cycle who just wants to know when their period is coming. A basic app can do that for less money. Looking for a contraceptive method, Mira is explicitly not FDA cleared for contraception. On a very tight budget without HSA or FSA access, the starter kit runs around $29. And the wands are an ongoing cost monthly of around $60 per cycle, depending on how many you use. The reality is that Mira is an investment in your health. And 10 to 20 wands per cycle can add up. The good news is that the FSA and HSA eligibility means that you can use those pre-tax dollars, and that changes the math meaningfully. All right, now it's time for what we all came here for, what I'm excited about, the SAFE framework. We're starting with S for security. Starting with security, there are 4 steps that you need to work through. First, you have to decide your own data preferences and risk tolerance. You need to analyze the privacy policy for red flags. Starting with security, there are 4 steps. First, you need to decide your data preferences and risk tolerance. Then analyze the privacy policy for red flags, explore the frequently asked questions for additional clarity, and investigate the company's privacy track record. What's important for you to know is that no one can decide your risk tolerance or data preferences but you. So this is the part of the framework where you need to do your own reflecting and see what you're comfortable with regarding your data storage, how long it's stored, whether it can be shared with third parties, and only you can decide that. So here's what I can tell you about Mira specifically. Their privacy policy states that they do not sell personal information. They do not sell health data to third parties. The app stores your full hormone history indefinitely, which is a feature because the longitudinal data that is genuinely valuable, but it also means that your sensitive health information lives in a cloud environment for a long term. Their FAQs do address data handling, and they have not had any documented major privacy breaches or scandals on record. But this is important. I'm not going to tell you that that's enough for you to decide, because that's not how this framework works. Step 1 is yours. You decide your risk tolerance. For deeper guidance on exactly what to look for in a privacy policy, the specific phrases and red flags, the questions to ask, Bethany's book is where you go to. Now for accuracy. There's 4 steps. Check for regulatory approval, search for clinical validation studies, evaluate partnerships with medical institutions, and check product reviews. This is Mira's strongest pillar and where the research really starts. On clinical validation, a 2025 Mira lab study showed Mira's hormones reading were consistently closest to certified reference values across all 4 hormones compared to other hormone trackers. On medical institution partnerships, Mira has active clinical collaborations with IVF clinics and is recommended by over 3,000 healthcare professionals. Now, in reference to product reviews, here's 2 resources that I haven't discussed before. There is SheRanked, which is run by Dr. Christina Davies, also known as the FemTech Doctor here on YouTube, and Femnovate's FemTech Market Maps, which go over the different sectors of women's health, like maternal health, menopause, etc., and there are more coming out this year. F is Foundation. Mira was co-founded by Sylvia Kang, who serves as CEO. She grew up in China training as a concert pianist, but spent nights secretly teaching herself physics from her grandfather's books. She began building Mira in 2016 after watching a friend struggle with her fertility journey without answers. Mira was built at her kitchen counter when she herself struggled with fertility in her mid-30s. Why does that matter? Because Foundation is asking you to look at who's leading the company and whether the mission is real. Mira was built by somebody who experienced the problem firsthand, and that origin shapes the product. Mira's medical advisory board includes board-certified OBGYNs, reproductive endocrinologists. Their team includes scientists, engineers, and fertility specialists. On public thought leadership, Sylvia Kang has spoken about the barriers facing female entrepreneurship, the underrepresentation research, and the challenges of being an Asian American female entrepreneur. Equity. There's 3 steps. Check for product features for inclusivity, check the website for diversified representation and affordability transparency, and assess the company's advocacy and industry influence. On features, this is where Mira genuinely stands out. The product is designed to work for your regular cycles, PCOS, perimenopausal women's, and complex hormonal presentations. On representation and affordability, Mira's website reflects diverse representation in their imagery and user stories. The affordability is their gap, and this is a device that may not be accessible for all people, especially if you don't have an HSA or FSA account. On advocacy, partners with clinical institutions, and their CEO speaks publicly on women's health apps. That's meaningful industry influence. Equity is where the whole femtech category, including Mira, still has a lot of work to do, and that's not a knock on Mira. It's just an assessment of where we stand in this industry right now. If you want to go deeper into what we've covered today, I'm pointing you back to Bethany Corbin and the FemTech Revolution, but also if you feel that this might be a bit overwhelming for you and you want someone else who's done the work, someone that you can trust, Dr. Christina Davies is a medical doctor and former military officer who built one of the most rigorous doctor-led review systems for health apps that exist right now. So the work is done for you, and she ranks them across 4 categories: clinical credibility, ethical standards, data privacy, and user safety. Very similar to Bethany Corbin's SAFE framework as far as values. If you want to go deeper on femtech apps and look at the full market, there's also the Femnovate market maps, which look at cycle awareness, maternal health, menopause, and there are more coming out this year, such as oncology and other issues facing women's health. The market maps give you a view of the regulatory status that a device is in. So it's important where you can see if it's expert advised or if it's been cleared by the FDA yet. And that, once again, is your choice for risk tolerance and can help you decide what device works for you depending on the stage that they're in. Okay, so the verdict. Mira is genuinely impressive. The fluorescent immunoassay method, the quantitative readings, the hormonal fingerprint that builds over time. Mira is doing something that didn't exist at the consumer level 10 years ago. They're bringing clinical grade monitoring to your home. Their research supports the accuracy claims, with the honest caveat that urinary tracking has inherent variation and it's not a replacement for blood work, especially in the clinical fertility treatment context. Mira is doing what FemTech should do. It's giving women data about their own bodies that the healthcare system was never designed to provide. Is it worth it? If hormone health is something you're actively trying to understand, yes. The investment is real, but the data you get back is genuinely valuable. So, that's Tech Tuesday, everyone. Thank you for coming and breaking down these devices with me. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next week.